I like to thank Yahweh for bringing us here once again. This holy Sabbath, Kadesh Sabbath. Kadesh is Hebrew holy on the Sabbath. Yowm, to be with Chanak, his sister, his brother, his sister, to be in, not saying the congregation of the assembly, like we all are ministers to ourselves, to others, and that's what it is. And like the brother Lafayette was saying, we never get tired of hearing this word, day to night. While you're dreaming, sleeping, it's all good. And this temple is just like our temple.
We're glad that you have tuned in to join us, and we are on part 2 of the lesson entitled, This Day We Perceive That Yahweh is Among Us. This day we perceive that Yahweh is among us. And on part 1, we saw that on the pathway to the kingdom, the devil will tell us that when we make a mistake or a misstep, that Yahweh is not with us. But when we misstep on the way to the kingdom, it does not mean that Yahweh is not with us. And we were looking at when David made a misstep and a mistake, and we were in 2nd Shemuel, and we saw that he lusted after someone else's Ishshah, someone else's wife, and then Yahweh raised up somebody to come to him. Yahweh gave this prophet, this Nabi, Natan, the spiritual perception to help David perceive that he was in error, so that he could get back in right standing with Yahweh. So we're going to pick it up in 2nd Shemuel, the 11th chapter, where we have been looking at this factual recording of what happened in King David's life. And what Yahweh is showing us is that David was not an unrighteous man. He was a righteous man. He wanted to be right. And there are times when we make a mistake or a misstep, or we sin. It's not deliberate. It's not that we want to be wicked or that we want to do wrong, but we can be overtaken in a fault. And Yahweh tells us in the Wright, the New Testament, that those of us that see someone who's overtaken in a fault, it says those of us that are spiritual, that are about Yahweh, to restore them in the spirit of meekness. So there's a way that we restore people, because we understand that we're not out here purposely doing wrong. We want to know when we've done wrong, because we want to get right. 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, and we had looked at on the first show how David went through different schemes trying to cover up what he had done, but again, he was in deception. And the last thing we read about him trying to do was he was trying to get Ibryi, whose Ishshah he had committed adultery with, to get drunk so he would go home and sleep with his wife, because his wife was pregnant. All right, so we're going to pick it up at 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, and let's start at verse 14 and continue to read this account, this recording of what happened when David was in error and in deception and didn't realize he was in error. All right, 2 Samuel 11 and 14, please.
And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah.
Now here is David, and he's planning on another scheme to try to cover up the fact that he committed adultery with this woman and now she's pregnant. Everything he tried to get the man to go and sleep with his Ishshah didn't work. Now he's giving this man, who's trusting David, he's giving him a letter, and Uriah didn't know that the letter said for the general of the battle, the captain in the battle, to put him on the front line so he could get killed in the battle. All right? But this is just showing us how in our humanity and on our way to the kingdom, there are things that it is possible for us to fall off into. Doesn't mean because we're human we have to do that. But what Yahweh is showing us is that He always wants to restore us. And He always wants us to get back in right standing. Okay? So here He's given, it says, it came to pass in the morning that Dawid wrote a letter to Joab, who was the general, the captain in the battle, and sent it by the hand of Uriah, this man that he's trying to make something right because he committed adultery with his wife. Verse 15.
And he wrote in the letter, saying, Set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die.
So you see, and here Dawid, he was not a wicked man. But you see what he did in this letter that he had Uriah himself carry. It says King Dawid wrote in the letter, Amar, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and draw back from him, that he may be smitten and that he may move or die in the battle. You think that was talking about a wicked man who was plotting this against this other man. But Dawid was righteous, but he was in sin and he was deceived, and he was trying to cover up the sin. All right, which can happen to all of us. Verse 16.
And it came to pass, when Joab observed the city, that he assigned Uriah unto a place where he knew that valiant men were.
All right, 17.
And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab. And there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also.
So Joab, the general, army general, he just followed what the king ordered him to do. It says, it came to pass when Joab observed the city, that he assigned Uriah, after he had read this letter that Uriah gave him from the king, unto a place where he knew that valiant Adam were. And Ha-Adam of the city went out and fought with Joab, and there fell some of Ha-Am, of Ha-Ebed of Dawid, and Uriah the Hittite moved also. Let's go to 2 Samuel. We want to skip down to verse 18. So here King Dawid made more missteps. He ordered the captain to put the man whose wife he had committed adultery with and impregnated her, to put her on the front battle lines to be killed in battle. All right, 2 Samuel 11, and let's read verse 18, please.
Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war.
All right, 19.
And charged the messenger, saying, When thou hast made an end of telling the matter of the war unto the king,
20.
and if so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, Wherefore approach ye so nigh unto the city when ye did fight? Knew ye not that they would shoot from the wall?
All right, 21.
Who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman cast a piece of a millstone upon him from the wall, and he died in Thebes? Why went ye nigh the wall? Then say thou, Thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.
All right, so here is Joab, the general, reporting the things that happened in the war, but he's clouding it up with a whole lot of other things because he had read that letter that King Dawid had given him, and he understood that Dawid wanted this man dead. So in the end of his report, it says in verse 18, Then Joab sent and told Dawid all the things concerning the war. And then in verse 21, it says, Thy Ebed Uriah the Hittite is moved also. And that was the whole point of it. He was just letting him know what happened. And also, you sent this letter, so he got killed also. Verse 22.
So the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab has sent him for.
23.
And the messenger said unto David, Surely the men prevailed against us, and came unto us into the field, and we were upon them even unto the entering of the gate.
All right, 24.
And the shooters shot from off the wall upon thy servants, and some of the king's servants be dead, and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.
All right, so he's just rehearsing everything that General Joab told him to tell him to King Dawid, verse 25.
Then David said unto the messenger, Thus shalt thou say unto Joab, Let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devour one as well as another. Make thy battle more strong against the city and overthrow it, and encourage thou him.
So he's giving this messenger a message to take back to the general. Then Dawid amarred unto the messenger, Thou shalt amar unto Joab, Let not this thing displease you, for the sword devoureth a cod as well as another. Well, but Dawid set him up. All right? Make thy battle more coac against the city and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. All right, he's telling the messenger, encourage Joab with these words that I'm giving him. All right, verse 26.
And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband.
All right, so now here's Uriah's Ishshah, the one that King Dawid had committed adultery with. When Ishshah of Uriah shamar that Uriah her Ish was moved, she mourned for her Ish. All right, and then now verse 27.
And when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife, and bare him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased Yahweh.
All right, now, and we read, before we actually read this account, where Yahweh had sent the prophet Natan to Dawid and talked about this man that had a whole lot of lambs and flock, and then this one man had one little ewe lamb, and he, let him know that the rich man took the one little ewe lamb from the poor man, and so at the end of it all, then Dawid said, you know what, make him restore fourfold. That was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong, and then Natan told him, it's talking about you. You're the one. So we read the end of this before we actually looked at the details of what happened. So it says, when the morning was past, after Dawid had put the man at the forefront of the battle so he could get killed, it says Dawid sent and fetched Uriah's Ishshah to his bayit, to the palace. And she became his Ishshah, and bare him a bond. She became his wife. Well, she was already pregnant with his baby from the adultery. And it says, she bare him a son. But the thing that Dawid had done displeased Yahweh. So we understand, again, Dawid was not a wicked man. But Yahweh recorded this true history of his life to show us that he's about restoring us back to right standing, just like he wanted to restore King Dawid. Let's go to Psalms, the 51st chapter. So we see that finally King Dawid added insult to injury and took the woman he had committed adultery with as his wife after he had arranged for her husband to die in battle. And now the king went at least 9 months of misstepping in this incident, all right, before the prophet came to him. He didn't come to him until after the child was born. All right, Psalms 51, and let's read verse 1, please.
Have mercy upon me, O Elohim, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions.
All right, now here's Dawid, and then here's us. When we make a misstep, when we fall, and we get back up and we repent and tell Yahweh, you know what, Yahweh, I'm sorry, forgive me, I was wrong. He says, have hasid upon me, O Elohim, according to thy loving kindness. Yahweh is loving and kind. According to the multitude of thy tender hasid, blot out my transgressions. So this is the Psalms that came up out of Dawid after he went through this incident and other incidents, because Yahweh told him that the sword will not depart from your house. There were consequences of what he did. Yahweh forgave him. like he forgives us, but there's still consequences from things that we do. And he's just in Psalms expressing how to get back right with Yahweh, how to be restored with Yahweh. All right, verse 2.
Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin.
All right, so we want to be washed thoroughly from our iniquity, whatever we do wrong, and cleanse thoroughly from our hata'ah, our sin. Verse 3.
For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me.
Verse 4.
Against thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest.
All right, so he's saying against you, Yahweh, and you only have I hata'ah. Why? Because he was Yahweh's son, just like we're Yahweh's son and daughter. Against you, Yahweh, and you only have I hata'ah. It talks about Yahshua when that Egyptian woman wanted to have sexual relations with him. And he said, I can't sin against Yahweh by doing this. All right, it would have been adultery just like Dawid did. But Dawid himself also said, I've sinned against Yahweh only. And just like Yahceph knew, so when we hata'ah, when we sin, it's against Yahweh. It's between us and Yahweh. It says, against thee and thee only have I hata'ah, and done this ra in your sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou amar, and be clear when thou judgest. We want to skip down to verse 10. So it's said that this psalm, Psalm 51, is referring to the David-Bathsheba adulterous incident that we're looking at. And King Dawid was righteous, and he wanted to stay righteous. And once he saw, oh my goodness. So some people will say, well, how could he not see it? Who knows what people see at whatever time they see? All we know is, it said that Dawid is going to be set at a place on high in the kingdom. And the righteous lineage came through David's seed. So we have to adjust our mind and ask Yahweh for understanding about him saying that David was righteous. But he's showing us here in Psalms, we're going to skip down to verse 10, and this is supposed to be referring to the incident when he was committed adultery with Bathsheba. Let's read verse 10, please.
Create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a right spirit, a right ruach within me.
All right, so he knew that he had slipped, he had misstepped, he had made a mistake. And he's going to Yahweh, because that's the only way that he can get that right ruach back. It says, bara, or create in me a clean Layil, O Elohim, and renew a Yamein ruach within me. Renew it, refresh me. Get me up out of this deception. Verse 11.
Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Ruach HaKodesh from me.
So here's Dawid saying in the Zignah Barit that he has Ruach HaKodesh in him, just like we have Ruach HaKodesh in us. It is in us. It's not a he. That's a Catholicism where they gave it a masculine personhood. Yahweh always referred to it as it. It says, cast me not away from thy presence. This is King Dawid, and take not thy Ruach HaKodesh from me. All right, so he's got it. Verse 12.
Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free Ruach.
All right, so he's talking about Ruach HaKodesh again. It says, restore unto me. He understands Yahweh's about restoration. He's about getting us back in right standing. Restore unto me Hasimka of thy Yahshua. That's the Hebrew word, salvation. And uphold me with thy free Ruach. Talking about Ruach HaKodesh. Verse 13.
Then will I teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee.
So he's saying after I went through this, he said, once you restore me back, and I'm listening to Ruach HaKodesh in me, which is you telling me what to do, you and Yahshua, then will I Yara transgressors your ways, Yahweh, and Hata'ah shall be converted unto thee. All right, let's go back to 2 Shemuel, the 12th chapter. 2 Samuel, the 12th chapter. We want to start at verse 13. 2 Samuel 12. And now we're going to see exactly what he said in Psalm 51. 2 Samuel 12 in verse 13, where he's saying, only against you, Yahweh, have I sinned. 2 Samuel 12 and verse 13.
And David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against Yahweh. And Nathan said unto David, Yahweh also hath put thou away thy sin, thou shalt not die.
All right, now it says, and we had looked at that scripture on the first show, that if a man and woman be caught in adultery, they both were supposed to be stoned to death in the land of Yisrael. All right, so here David amar to Nathan, I have hata against Yahweh. And Nathan amar to David, Yahweh hath also put away thy hata. You shall not move. Why? Because it was the law. They could have been stoned to death, the man and the woman caught in adultery. All right, that's in Leviticus that we looked at. All right, verse 14.
Howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasions to the enemy of Yahweh to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die.
Now here's Yahweh, and here explaining through the Nabi Natan, it says, howbeit, this is one of the consequences. Because by what you did, David, because people are looking at you, you have given great occasion to the enemies of Yahweh, because people are always looking at us who are serving Yahweh to try to find something that we're doing wrong or not quite doing right, so they can blaspheme Yahweh or talk against Yahweh or say Yahweh is not this or that. He's giving great occasion to the enemies of Yahweh to blaspheme. It says, Hazakah also that is born unto thee shall surely move. The child's going to surely die, because they need to see the consequences of what King David did. All right, verse 15.
And Nathan departed unto his house, and Yahweh struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick.
All right, so you see it says Yahweh struck the child. Hasakar that Uriah's Ishshah bare unto David, and it was very sick. And Yahweh already said the child's going to die. That's the consequence. All right, that wasn't the only consequence, but that was one of them. And that was to still the enemies of Yahweh's mouths. Verse 16.
David therefore besought Elohim for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay on all night upon the earth.
All right, and now the reason he did this is because he knows Yahweh is merciful. All right, the prophet told him the child was surely going to die, but the child wasn't dead yet, and then he understands, hey, Yahweh is merciful, and he, could change his mind. So it says, David therefore besought Yahweh or Elohim for Hazakar, and David fasted and went in and laid all Layil upon Ha'ered before Yahweh. So, but the king picked up his need to get back in right standing with Yahweh, and he saw what he had done. And he also understood that there were consequences. All right, let's read verse 19. 12 and 19.
But when David saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servant, is the child dead? And they said, he is dead.
All right, so in between the verse that we read last in verse 19, the child died. And it says, when David saw that his servant, his Ebed, whispered, David perceived. See, we're talking about spiritual perception. This day we perceive that Yahweh is among us. It says, so now David has his spiritual perception working again. It says, he perceived that Hazakar was moved, was Mavet. Therefore David amar unto his Ebed is Hazakar Mavet, and they amar, he is Move. He is Mavet. He's dead. And then you keep reading, you'll see he got up, he washed his face, and he started eating. And then his servants were looking at him like, well, we thought surely he was going to go to pieces after this. But Dawid told him, hey, I'm going to go to him, but he's not coming back to me. The decision has been made. So that's how we do now. We stand in faith until Yahweh makes a decision. Once the decision is made, then you get on up and you go about your business because Yahweh's made the decision. Let's go to Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. So Dawid got his spiritual perception back. So Yahweh gave us the ability to spiritually perceive things. And we do that through Ruach HaKodesh, which is Yahweh's power source. It gives us the ability to spiritually perceive things. And Yahweh, through the Ruach, quickens us to see spiritually what we need to see. Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. I'm going to read one verse. Verse 1. Ephesians 2, verse 1.
And you has he quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sins.
All right, so he's giving us a heightened spiritual awareness to perceive things. And you have he quickened, or made us spiritually alive, who were moved in trespasses and hata'ah. But when he sealed us with Ruach HaKodesh, he quickened us to be able to perceive things spiritually in this natural body. It's Ruach HaKodesh perceiving it through us, but Yahweh allows us to pick it up. Let's go to Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. So this quickening, we don't control it. Yahweh controls it. But it makes us pick up on spiritual insights. When we need to pick up on them, then Yahweh operates Ruach HaKodesh, and we start perceiving and we start seeing and picking up spiritual insights. Nehemiah, or Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. And we're going to see this Nabi Nehemiah. Yahweh had him pick up on some things. There was somebody that came to him and told him something, and they wanted to, again, blaspheme Yahweh and knock Yahweh by him doing this certain thing. And Yahweh had him spiritually perceive what was going on. All right, Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. Let's start reading at verse 10, please.
Afterwards I came unto the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Mehetabeel, who was shut up. And he said, let us meet together in the house of Elohim within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night they will come to slay thee.
Verse 11.
And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there that, being as I am, will go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in.
Verse 12.
And lo, I perceived that Elohim had not sent him, but that he pronounced his prophecy against me. For Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him.
So these are the enemies, and they were against Nehemiah and the rest of ancient Israel rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. It said, this man came into the house, and he's telling Nehemiah, let's meet in the house in the temple of Elohim. Let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come in to kill you. Yea, in Layil will they come to kill you. And then Nehemiah told him, should such a man as I flee? In other words, Yahweh is my protection. Why should I go in the temple and hide? And it's, who is there that, being as I am, would go into the temple to save his Kai? He says, I will not go in. And then says, lo, he perceived his spiritual perception, Ruach HaKodesh, through Yahweh, through Ruach HaKodesh, was talking to him and letting him know. He perceived that Yahweh had not sent this man, but that he had pronounced this Nabuah, prophecy, against him, against Nehemiah, for his enemy. Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. All right, verse 13.
Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid, and to do so and sin, that they might have matter for an evil report, that they might reproach me.
All right, so he's saying if he had followed this man and went in the temple and hid, it would have been sin. All right, because he wouldn't have been listening to Yahweh and what Yahweh said, but Yahweh gave him the spiritual perception to know that Yahweh hadn't sent this man. Well, just like he gave it to Nehemiah, he gives us that same spiritual perception to know who he sent and who he's not sent. It says, therefore was he hired. He was hired by Nehemiah's enemies, who were Yahweh's enemies, that Nehemiah should be afraid and do so, go hide in the temple, and it says, in Hatah, in sin, that they might have matter for a raw report, that they might reproach him, to accuse him of not being a man of Yahweh or sent from Yahweh and doing the things of Yahweh. It wasn't that they cared, they just wanted to knock him down. All right, just like anybody who's serving Yahweh or doing something for Yahweh, there are people who just want to knock you down. All right, we're going to skip down to verse 16. So Nehemiah was quickened to know that the man who came to him was not sent from Yahweh. He got this spiritual perception through Ruach HaKodesh. Yahweh does the same thing to us. This enabled him to continue doing what Yahweh told him to do. Let's read verse 16, 6 and 16, please.
And it came to pass that when all our enemies heard thereof, and all the heathen that were about us saw these things, they were much cast down in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was wrought of our Elohim.
And that's how it happens. When people came against Nehemiah, just like when they come against you, it says it came to pass that when all our enemies, you could put yourself in that spot, Shema thereof, and all the heathen that were about us saw these things. What did they see? They saw the temple keep coming, keep brick upon brick, keep being put up, them keep doing the work of Yahweh. They were much cast down in their own eyes. Why? Because they perceived, they saw with their natural eye, that this work was from our Elohim. It was from Yahweh. And that's a shame when somebody's cast down by somebody doing something good, whether it's for Yahweh or whatever. You have people in this world, their priorities are just backwards. And they get discouraged when there's something good that somebody else is doing or going on in their life. But we want to perceive the things that Yahweh wants us to perceive. Let's go to 1 Samuel again, the 12th chapter. So Yahweh has given us, just like Nehemiah, just like Natan, keen insight into the spirit realm. 1 Samuel 12. So that we see beyond the natural circumstances. And he needs us to do that because we are in a spiritual war. And he needs to give us instructions, and he wants us to pick up on different cues that are going on with people, and they don't have to say anything. You could just be sitting around and nobody saying anything, and the Ruach, Yahweh will just, through the Ruach, give you these spiritual perceptions about people, and you'll just start picking them up. Again, you don't control it, Yahweh controls it. 1 Samuel 12, let's read one verse, verse 17.
Is it not wheat harvest today? I will call upon Yahweh, and he shall send thunder and rain, that ye may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which ye have done in the sight of Yahweh, in asking you a king.
Now, this is talking about ancient Israel, when they went and asked Yahweh for a natural king, when Yahweh was already their king. It says, it's not wheat harvest today. I will call upon Yahweh, and he shall send thunder and rain, that ye may perceive and see that your Belial, is great, which ye have done in the sight of Yahweh, in asking you a melech. So we are not of those that see after the fact. Go to Yeshayahu or Isaiah, the 6th chapter. But there are some that see after the fact. And David got into a little bit of it. We can all get into a little bit of it. But praise Yahweh's great and holy name, he brings us up out of it. Isaiah 6 and verse 9. We are not of those that see after the fact. 6 and 9, please.
And he said, go and tell his people, and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not.
So these people just don't see. Yamar, go and tell this Shamar ye indeed, but be not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. Looking at something, but don't know what they're looking at. Let's go to Matthew or Matthew's the 13th chapter. And we can see it. That was in the Old Testament. We're going to see it in the New Testament. Matthew's 13 and verse 14. Matthew's 13 and verse 14.
And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and not perceive.
All right, it says in them. He's talking about this certain class of people, which is not of us, that see after the fact. In them is fulfilled Hanabuah of Yeshayah, which Amar. By Shamar ye shall Shamar, and shall not be, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 13th chapter. So Yahweh has given us his spiritual perception to see what is really going on. 2 Corinthians 13. And what we are to say and do about it, if anything. And Yahweh causes us to examine and see ahead of the circumstances with our spiritual antenna when the need arises. 2 Corinthians 13, one verse, verse 5.
Examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Yahshua, Mashiach, is in you, except ye be reprobates?
All right, so here is Yahweh instructing us, examine yourselves, whether ye be in Ha'imina. Prove your own selves. Yada ye not your own selves, how that Yahshua Mashiach is in you. How is Yahshua Mashiach in me or in you? Same way he was in David, Ruach HaKadosh. Same way he was in Nehemiah, Ruach HaKadosh. It said Yahshua would go away and he would send the Comforter to be with you and in you. So it said, know ye not your own selves how that Yahshua Mashiach is in you, except ye be reprobate, except you be natural-minded, except you be cut off from the kingdom. Well, we're not reprobates. We are part of those that inherit the kingdom. So this English word perceive and perceive is the Hebrew word yada. That's Y-A-D-A, found at Strong's number 3045. It is a primitive root word meaning to know, to ascertain by seeing, by observation, by recognition, by instruction, to acknowledge, to have knowledge of, to make known, to perceive, to regard, to have respect, to be a man of skill, to teach, to be able to tell, to have understanding. Matthew's 13, let's go back and I want to read verse 16, please. Matthew's 13 and verse 16.
But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear.
All right, and so they are blessed because Yahweh's power source, Ruach HaKadosh, is in us. giving us not just natural eyes, but spiritual eyes and spiritual ears. Go to Luke, the 10th chapter. So he said, you have blessed eyes and blessed ears. That is when you have been quickened. Luke 10 and verse 23, please.
And he turned, you said
10 and 23.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned him unto his disciples and said privately, blessed are the eyes which see the things that ye see.
So he's saying your eyes are blessed when Yahweh shows you things and you see the things, the spiritual things, and perceive the spiritual things that he allows you to see. Let's go back to Nehemiah, the 9th chapter. So Yahweh has wired those of us that are sealed with Ruach HaKodesh to be spiritually perceptive. We're wired up to be spiritually perceptive. Nehemiah, the 9th chapter, he calls it being sealed. He even talked about some people over here in the Zikna Barith, the Old Testament, being sealed. Nehemiah 9, going to start at verse 1.
Now in the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and with sackcloth and earth upon them.
Verse 2.
And the seed of Yisrael separated themselves from all strangers and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquity of their fathers.
Verse 3.
And they stood up in their place and read in the book of the law of Yahweh their Elohim 1/4 part of the day, and another 4th part they confess and worship Yahweh their Elohim.
All right, so now this is after Nehemiah and them got the temple built and the walls and everything in Jerusalem. It says the seed of Israel, well, they were assembled with fasting and sackcloth. And the seed of Israel separated themselves from all the strangers because they had gotten into that sin of marrying strange wives and, and doing all the things that Yahweh said, don't go into these people and make marriage just with them, your son to their daughter or daughter with their son. Said they separated themselves from the strangers and stood and confessed their hata'ah. Again, that's how we get restored. We confess. If we make a misstep, if we make a mistake, Yahweh gives us a spiritual perception to see it. Then we repent, we confess, and we ask for forgiveness and get right with Yahweh. And the iniquities of their Abba. They stood up in their place and read in the book of HaTorah of Yahweh the Elohim 1/4 part of Yowm, and another 4th part they confessed in Shaka Yahweh the Elohim. All right, skip down to verse 36. Nehemiah 9 and verse 36.
Behold, we are servants this day, and for the land that thou gavest unto our fathers to eat the fruit thereof and the good thereof, behold, we are servants in it.
37.
And it yielded much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us because of our sins. Also they have dominion over our bodies and over our cattle, and at their pleasure, and we are in great distress.
All right, now here's some people speaking wisdom. They realize that they're up under the curse, that they're in captivity. He's saying it yields much increase unto Hamelech whom thou hast set over us. Yahweh set over them. They went into captivity into Babylon for disobedience. Their forefathers did. He says, whom thou hast set over us because of our hata'ah. Talking about our forefathers. That's why we're over here in the north country. Also they have dominion over our Gibeah and over our cattle at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. Verse 38.
And because of all this, we make a sure covenant and write it, and our princes, Levites, and priests sealed unto it.
All right, so there's that seal. It says, because of all this, we make a sure bereath and write it. A sure bereath, when you understand Yahweh's the one, there's no point in being upset with another nationality. There's no point in looking for 40 acres and a mule. Yahweh's the reason that we're over here, and we're up under punishment, our forefathers, as far as what they did or didn't do in serving Yahweh. So then it behooves us to get ourselves together and go back and do what they were supposed to do. It says, because of all this, we make a sure covenant and write it in our Nasi, Levites, and Kohenah, seal unto it. So we come up under that covenant. All right, go to the 10th chapter and read verse 1.
Now those that sealed were Nehemiah, the Tertius, the son of Hilkiah, and Zechariah.
All right, it says, now those that were sealed. So these are the men that stood up and said, we're sealed to Yahweh. We're in this for Yahweh. We're going to do what Yahweh said to do. We're coming back to Yahweh, and we want to be right with Yahweh. Let's go back to the New Testament to 2 Corinthians, the 1st chapter. So in the New Testament, the English word sealed is the Greek word sphrazo. That's S-P-H-R-A-G-I-Z-O. It's found at Strong's number 4972. It means to stamp with a signet or private mark. Yahweh has stamped us with his private mark. For security or preservation, to keep secret, to attest, to set a seal, to seal up, to stop up. So the Kohen and the Kimya, they had this ceremony, and they knew Yahweh had sealed them, and they sealed back to the covenant. It says, yes, Yahweh, we're sealed in covenant with you. Well, we've done the same thing. We're sealed in covenant with Yahweh. All right, we're in 2 Corinthians, the 1st chapter. Let's start at verse 21, please. 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 21 reads,
Now he which established us with you in Mashiach and hath anointed us is Elohim.
Verse 22.
Who hath also sealed us and given the earnest of the Ruach in our hearts.
All right, so here it is, that sealing again. Yahweh's letting us know we've been sealed. By what? Ruach HaKodesh. It says, who hath also sealed us and given us the earnest of HaRuach in our Layil, joined with our Ruach. Let's go to Yachanan or John, the 15th chapter. So Yahweh gave us the ability to perceive spiritually, to have an advantage over others in this battle that we're in. He's given us an advantage. And all we have to do is listen and tune in. And he'll tell us stuff, and we will just be sitting up here, and then just out of the blue, we'll start picking up things, and Yahweh will start telling you things. John 15, he's given us the ability to perceive spiritually, so we do have an advantage over others. John 15, that are not with Yahweh. Let's start at verse 25. John 15 and verse 25 reads,
But this cometh to pass, that the word might be fulfilled that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause.
26.
But when the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Ruach of truth, which proceedeth from the Father, it shall testify of me.
That's right. We see the sister read it right. The Catholics put he in there, but it shall testify. Yahweh's power source. But when the Comforter, talking about Ruach HaKodesh, is come, whom I will send unto you from Ha'abba, even HaRuach of Emeth, which proceeded from Ha'abba, is Father Yahweh's personal Ruach, it shall testify of me. Let's go to John, the 16th chapter. So when we're asked what to do, Our response is, when Yahweh tells me, I will tell you. Because he causes me to perceive spiritually what I'm supposed to do or say. Or, when we're asked what to do, our response is, I'll pray about it and find out. Because we do not control our spiritual perception, we always check in with Yahweh about what to say and what to do. John 16, we want to start at verse 7. John 16 and verse 7, please.
Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is expedient for you that I go away. For if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send it unto you.
There you go. And she read it right again. This is Yahshua talking. Nevertheless, I tell you how I am it. It is expedient for you that I go away. For if I go not away, the Comforter, because the Comforter took Yahshua's place. The Comforter, Ruach HaKodesh, will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send it, Yahweh's power, unto you. And that has been done. And some people go by this pagan doctrine, talking about Ruach HaKodesh, was just on the day of the Feast of Weeks, which the world calls Pentecost, but we just saw in the Ibryi, the old covenant, that King David said, Yahweh, your free Ruach, your Ruach HaKodesh, don't take it away from me. So Yahweh's Nabi, his prophets, his Am, his people, in the Ibryi had Ruach HaKodesh. Let's go to Mark the 13th chapter. So Yahweh's spiritual perceptions are private revelations. They're private. They're not public, they're private. He's telling his people things privately. That's why he tells us inwardly, to cause us to perceive. These are private. Mark 13, we'll read one verse 3. Mark 13 and verse 3.
And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, over against the temple, Kepha and James and Yochanan and Andrew asked him privately.
All right, this is Yahshua. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against Habayah, the temple, Kepha and Yahweh and Yochanan and Andrew asked him privately. So they weren't in the public. It's private. This English word privately is the Greek word idios. That's I-D-I-O-S. Found at Strong's number 2398, meaning pertaining to one's own self, private or separate. When they were alone, apart, aside, privately, severally. Speaking privately is also called speaking in parables. Let's go to Yehezkel or Ezekiel, the 20th chapter. The disciples asked him privately. Ezekiel 20. And when you're talking the word of Yahweh, it does sound like Hebrew or Greek. It sounds strange to people. Ezekiel 21 verse 49. Ezekiel 20 and verse 49.
Then said I, Yahweh Elohim, they say of me, doth he not speak parables?
All right, because they didn't understand. But the disciples came to Yahshua privately to ask clarification. Well, what is this talking about? They're saying to Yehezkel, then Amar I, Yahweh Elohim, they Amar me. Doth he not Amar parables? Let's go back to the New Testament. So speaking privately is called speaking in parables. Matthew 24. When we're new to spiritual perception, we are to understand that they are private. Yahshua tells us these things privately through Ruach HaKodesh. Matthew 24 and verse 3.
And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciple came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of that coming and of the end of the world?
Now, Yahshua had said this openly in parables, but then the disciples privately, when they were alone among themselves, they came and asked him, when shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? Let's go to Mark, the 9th chapter. So it's private. They're asking these things for him to break it down for them. Because he spoke to the people without in parables. Mark 9 and verse 28.
And when he was come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could not we cast him out?
And again, this privately means separate. So they're separated. This is not something publicly. When he was coming to Yahweh, the disciples asked him privately, why could not we cast him out? Go to Luke, the 9th chapter. Spiritual revelations, spiritual perception is private. Luke 9. It's not a public thing, it's a private thing that Yahweh does with his people. Luke 9 and verse 10.
And the apostles, when they were returned, and told him all that they had done, and he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city of Bethsaida.
All right? And the disciplined ones, when they were returned, told him all that they had done. He had sent them out on a mission. Now they're coming back to report, and this is a private meeting. And he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city called Bethsaida.
I'd like to thank Yahweh for bringing us here once again. This holy Sabbath, Kadesh Sabbath. Kadesh is Hebrew holy on the Sabbath. Yowm, to be with Chanak, his sister, his brother, his sister, to be in, not saying the congregation of the assembly. Like we all are ministers to ourselves, to others, and that's what it is. And like the brother Lafayette was saying, we never get tired of hearing his word. Day to night, while you're dreaming, sleeping, it's all good. And this temple is just like our temple, pure love.